Okay, this meeting is called to order. Welcome to the September 10th, 2025 meeting of the City of Lake Forest Plan Commission. I am Mark Pasquazi, Chairman of the Commission. At this time, I would like to ask members of the Commission to introduce themselves, starting at my far right.
David Hunt.
Lisa Nearing.
Jamie Moorhead.
Louis Pickus.
Barrett Davy.
Paul Thomas.
And from City Staff, Ms. Kathy Sterniak is here tonight. All right, at this time, we're not going to do consideration of minutes, so we'll go right on to the first item on the agenda is a request for a recommendation in support of approval of a tentative and final plat of subdivision through a special use permit incorporating any related variances. The property is addressed as 1235 Elm Tree Road and 1310 Lake Road. The property is currently considered a single zoning lot and was originally part of a larger estate. The proposed subdivision is requested to allow the single zoning lot to be divided into two parcels held in separate ownerships. Property owner is Elm Tree Road LLC, Winslow S. Bent Trust, and Seth L. Bent Trust, presented by Nate. It was all good before the late lashes, the presenter. Before we get into that, I'll ask for a declaration of conflicts of interest and ex parte contacts by the board.
No.
None? Okay. Moving in, swearing in of the parties. Mr. Lashes, if you would mind raising your right hand, I'll swear you in. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you're about to give or have previously given is true and correct to your best knowledge? Okay, please proceed.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for meeting today to hear this petition. We've been working on this project for quite a long time, and I know some of you probably remember this from back in May of 24, so over a year ago. This is a very significant property in Lake Forest, and we've been working very carefully to envision the future. We were originally working with Stephen Bent, who is a direct descendant of the original developer of the lot. During the process, he did pass away, and so now we're working with his estate and his two stepchildren, or his stepson and son, who hope to come into ownership of the property. I'll go through this fairly quickly because I think most people are familiar with the property, but just to give you a little bit of general overview. The property is located on Lake Road. It spans between Lake Road and Elm Tree, and just to the south of it is Woodland Road. It is part of an estate that used to bridge Lake Road, and so the main house still exists on the east side of Lake Road. This portion of the property originally contained the formal gardens and the outbuildings of that estate. And here on the map, you can see two historic images of the tennis house, and then in red, you can kind of see where the structures are located on the property. This is a aerial view of the property from GIS survey. And here's an old plat of survey. You'll note that in this plat of survey, it's showing the property as two separate lots. When our client originally approached us to explore dividing this lot into two portions so that he could acquire half of the lot, and his sibling could acquire the other half of the lot, our initial thought was, let's split it the way it's been split in the past. There's a nice clean cut right through the property. It makes two clean lots. We already know what those lot lines are. Great. When we presented this to the Plan Commission at the last time and started talking about this project a little more in depth, a lot of concerns were raised about the lot line as it exists between these two parcels splits off a portion of the garden. So it cuts right through the fountain portion of the garden. And while the two potential owners of the property are very friendly and get along really great, that's not guaranteed forever. So we were asked to look at this property a little more closely and consider that lot line sort of severing the garden. The other issue that came up with this proposed lot division is that all of the buildings are on the west side of the property, and there are no structures on the west side of the property, the east side of the property. What Kathy highlighted for us about that is that you can't have a developed lot in Lake Forest without a primary use. So we were creating a non-conforming lot rather than just dealing with a non-conforming lot by not having a primary residence on that eastern portion of the property. Here's some images of those existing structures. On the left, this is the existing carriage house. There is a garage, a greenhouse, and some workrooms on the first floor. And the second floor does have an apartment that's currently rented out by a caregiver, a property caregiver. On the right side of the slide, you see the cottage. This was a historic farmhouse that David Adler reclad in Cream City brick to match the remainder of the property when he built the primary residence on the east side of Lake Road and added the carriage house as well and the tennis house. These are images of the tennis house. This is probably the most significant building on the property. It's a David Adler building that's immaculately preserved. Everything is still there. It was actually very briefly served as a residence while the main house was being completed, and so the kind of cottage portion of this house has a little bit more than the tennis house in Lake Bluff that Adler also designed but never kind of served as a residence. The kitchen is just a little tiny galley kitchen. It's still split up into a women's locker room and a men's locker room. There's no mud room, there's no garage. You just kind of walk in the front door into this beautiful paneled room. Here's some images of the historic garden. This is a garden designed by Vitali, and Rose Standish Nichols also did some work here. There's some beautiful gates. There's some beautiful walls. There's a great central alley. Stephen Bent spent a lot of time working on this garden, and he had Craig Bergman restore the plantings while he was in possession of the property. The lower right is a picture during winter, which I think is a stunning time to see the garden. You get a real great sense of all the evergreens and the structure. This is an image showing the grading of the plan, and it might be a little hard to read, but it also shows the steep slope setback for the property. And one thing to note about that is that every single structure on the property is within the steep slope setback. They were all built right along the edge of the ravine. They are all within that setback. There's also an existing outdoor tennis court. I'm gonna see if it's in this corner here. This is an exterior grass tennis court, which doesn't conform to current setbacks. The future owner of the property would like to make some minor changes to the property so that it operates a little bit more like a single-family home. This is the proposed site plan that shows some of those changes. When Stephen Bent owned this property and owners prior to him, no one has lived on this property full-time since, forever. Like, the main house was a house. Since this has been split off, it's never been used as a full-time single-family home, and it really doesn't function that way. So we're making some very modest changes. We're going to recreate a historic trellis, and then we're going to match the volume of that trellis to allow us to create a mudroom entrance to the house. We're going to expand the kitchen into the women's bathroom and hall. There's 2 bathrooms on the first floor because there was a men's and women's side. And that will allow us to create a modest kitchen, a little addition, and then we'd also like to add a two-car garage because the carriage house is really not a modern functional garage. We did go to HPC to review all of these proposed additions. They approved the full package of what we're proposing. We're trying to move forward with a fairly light touch. Now that Ethan knows that HPC approves what he wants to do with his property, and he'll be able to do the effort it takes to make this into a single-family home, he wants to go ahead with the splitting the property that'll affect the sale of the two parcels to Ethan Mears, who is the stepson of Stephen Bent, and then Winslow Bent, who's the son of Stephen Bent. So it'll be split into two and stay within the same family. Winslow Bent has no development plans for the east side of the property. He is a tinker and he wants to use the garage as a workspace. He really likes the gardens, and he has a plan to come up with an agreement to share those gardens with his sister Marion. And that will be the plan going forward. These small additions to the west side of the property and really no changes to the east side of the property. Taking into account the feedback we received at the last plan commission and feedback to date, we've contoured the division line between the properties. So what we'd like to do, I'm gonna just try to highlight it with my highlighter. We're gonna come off of this kind of edge of the property where the old kind of division line is located. So we're gonna go up until we get about 5 feet from the garden wall, and then we're just gonna offset around that garden wall up to the apex of the curved portion. Then we're gonna continue a straight line until we get to a plane that is defined by the division right between the cottage and the garage. And then we're gonna head through those buildings until we hit the ravine, and then we're just gonna go down the slope of the ravine. So it's a little more complex than what we had originally planned, but it relates to everything that's there now. It kind of splits the difference between the existing buildings. It provides a 5-foot buffer from that garden wall so that any future maintenance can be done to that wall from the side of one owner. So here is the plat that Black Engineering has put together for us, showing that division. Their plat is devoid of any buildings or improvements, so it really just shows the division of the property line. But here you can see where that split is, and the garden really nestles right into that nook. We know this is a give and take proposition, and so we've laid some things on the table. The things that we'd like to offer are an easement to maintain the planted buffer along Elm Tree Road to minimize any impact to any neighbors. All anticipated developments are central to the lot. We're offering a preservation easement on the garden fountain feature itself, which includes the garden wall with the fountain. There's a beautiful kind of courtyard with this garden. And we're providing an easement at the first 50 feet of the lot in the front yard setback to preserve the wooded character of the property. One of the really special things about this property is that there are mature trees studded throughout the property. It's not like they're all lined up on a property line. You really have a beautiful park-like feel, and we want to maintain that, and we're willing to, put that down on paper and say we will maintain that. So that's what we would like to do, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Very good, thank you. Identification of issues by staff.
Thank you, Chairman Pasquesi, members of the commission. First, an explanation of a zoning lot. Why today is this property in its entirety from Elm Tree to Lake Road considered a single lot? And why couldn't they just walk in and separate, have each of those pre-existing parcels held in separate ownership? Because it is part of a larger estate. It has been in common use and held in common ownership for decades. That, by definition in the city code, creates a single zoning lot. Today, the property is actually 3 tax lots. I think there's one image in your packet that shows that the east lot, at some point, and I never figured out why or who did it, but there's an L-shaped tax lot that was carved off of, you can see it there, carved off of the east lot. So technically, it's 3 tax lots with 3 separate tax ID numbers, but it is a single zoning lot. So a subdivision is required. As Mr. Lilacious explained, when they were before the Plan Commission Plan Commission really had 2 concerns. One is the configuration of the lots, because the garden was severed. That was a very strong term, but you used it. And second, a question about what are the future plans for the property? And we can never predict the future, but after much careful thought, the petitioners came back with a plan that proposed a subdivision that preserved the garden intact, maintained the fountain with the garden, along with a small area of a 5-foot buffer that would allow maintenance. And importantly, the east lot now includes what meets the definition of a primary structure. On residential lots, in order to have any improvements, a fence, pillars, a swimming pool, you need a primary residential structure. The carriage house, which on the first floor is a garage, does have a living unit above, so that does qualify as the primary residential structure. I know some of the questions before included if someone owned the east parcel and was using the garden and there were no restrooms associated with it, or there was nowhere to park. So from the perspective of the zoning code, the way the properties are now proposed to be configured, that does meet the subdivision requirements. This plat is before you tonight for both tentative and final plat approval. That's appropriate because there are no public or private infrastructure improvements needed or proposed. There's no private roads to be constructed, no sanitary sewers, no water lines. So with 2-lot subdivisions, it's very common to bring a tentative and final plat before you. Plats of subdivision, particularly of old estates, it's not unusual for those plats to include a note and indicate the location of existing structures. And note that at the time the subdivision was approved, that those existing structures and the nonconformities, the location of the structures within the steep slope setback, that those are recognized as existing conditions, as existing legal nonconforming conditions at the time of subdivision. So we're recommending that a note, and we can certainly work out the wording, be on the plat so it's clear that it's acknowledged that there is construction in the steep slope setback, which didn't exist at the time that these buildings were constructed, and that the unique configuration of the tennis house, because it goes so deep into the ravine, that entire lower level is counted as square footage. So there's an existing non-conforming situation with respect to square footage as well. And the Historic Preservation Commission did acknowledge that and recognize that our calculation method certainly never contemplated being used for a structure such as this. The petitioner mentioned a tree preservation easement in the 50-foot setback along Lake Road. That too would be noted on the plat. Tree preservation is really, it doesn't mean that nothing can be done there. What it means is that existing trees in healthy condition need to be preserved and not removed. Certainly if a tree dies, then the tree can come out, and we'd look for some replanting in the future to, over time, maintain that high-level canopy and eventually have mature trees reestablished in that area. The petitioner also mentioned a landscape buffer along Elm Tree Road. That can also be noted on the plat. With respect to a preservation easement on the fountain, that's really something that I don't know whether the petitioner would work with Landmarks Illinois, but because that really is a historic preservation issue, that's not something we would note on the plat, but certainly it's the intent to preserve that. Any future changes to the property would require review through any appropriate process. If a zoning variance was requested, the zoning board of appeals would need to be involved in a review. If other approvals from the Historic Preservation Commission are requested, that commission would be involved. When this was before you in the first time, staff did suggest that this be directed to the Historic Preservation Commission just for overall input. And although the commission didn't direct that, the petitioner did do that really on their own initiative, and the commission recognized the uniqueness and importance of this property and wholeheartedly supported the minor modifications that are proposed, the addition of the mudroom, garage, and I don't know, they also saw a pavilion in the garden. I don't know whether that's still contemplated. But staff does recommend approval of both tentative and final plat. There are recommended conditions, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Kathy. At this point, I'll turn to the commission for questions or requests for clarification from petitioner or staff, or to petitioner or staff. Yes?
I have a question for Mr. Rand. I'd like to be clear on the implications of what we're deciding here tonight on the ability of the petitioner to build a home on the far east side of the lot. Could you kind of take me through where we're at today and where we will be if we were to approve this?
As with any property, if you approve this and there's a separate lot created on the east side, there could be future improvements, whether it be a house, whether it be a garage, whether a pool would be proposed. Anything that is proposed, again, if it didn't meet zoning setbacks, it would need to be reviewed through the Zoning Board of Appeals. If it required, any structure would require review by the Historic Preservation Commission. Tree removal would be part of that review, preservation of the garden or portions of the garden. So yes, future development on the east lot is possible. I understand that with the current intended owner, there are no immediate plans to do anything, but it is a buildable lot, and if variances were required, any specific approvals are required, they would need to go through the standard process.
So I take the petitioners absolutely for their word. They have no intention to build. Their commitment to the multi-generation commitment to the property is amazing. So I take that all as truth. So I'm not challenging that in any way, but things change, right? So if we were here today talking about, should we approve the construction of a house on Lake Street, my vote for that would be no. So if I understand this right, because I think it changes the nature of the neighborhood, I think there was a very similar request made across the street several years ago where this commission said no at that time. And I don't see any difference from this circumstance from those. So anyway, I would be a no. I'm desperately trying to get to yes because I think this all just makes a tremendous amount of sense. But I am hung up on creating the capability to add a house where I think it should not be, and really, that's where I'm at. Because I'm looking for some formulation that would get me over that hurdle.
The commission could not put a restriction on the east lot that there could be no further development. There's a process for that. If it would exceed the square footage, it would require a variance. Variances aren't guaranteed, but that wouldn't be the decision of this commission.
But if they say the petition, I know this is not their intention, but say just as this is situated today, they wanted to build a house on the east side of the lot, that would come to this commission.
No, it wouldn't.
Oh, okay. Okay, so us approving this request does not change the process they would have to go through to build a house in any way.
No.
It does not. Variances would, if the property remained in a single ownership and the owners wanted to build a guest house on the east side of the property, that would not come before this commission. It would probably, it would require HPC approval depending on where it was located. It may require zoning board of appeal approval, but essentially this subdivision that's being requested is for the purpose of allowing this property to be held in two ownerships. But whether it's continues to be held in one ownership or two, there's nothing the city can say to freeze it in time, essentially. I don't know if that helps or not.
No, that's helpful, thank you.
All right.
My only question is, and I recall the conversation we had about the, how to subdivide around this fountain, and that was really the issue. And, is there any magic around 5 feet at all in the context of best practices or anything like that?
That is a dimension that we proposed. That came from us rather than the city, and really the thinking was that it's a historic brick wall. It'll need to be tuck pointed in the future, and we want to make sure there's never any contention between, if the lots are owned by people who don't get along, that there's still the ability to maintain it from that side of the property.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Biggess?
Do we care about the tax lots, that they're separate? Does that matter? Do we want them to combine them into one? Just curious. City have a stand on that?
Yes, I would think as part of the plat of subdivision, the county will extinguish the current 3 tax lots, and there will be 2 brand new tax numbers assigned to each property. So those 3 tax lots will go away.
So we don't need to put anything into the subdivision to compel them or say that it needs to happen
No, we
naturally?
don't really have control over tax lots, but that would happen.
No other questions.
Commissioner Moorhead?
The last meeting in 2024, we talked about pulling the title or looking at the title to see if there were any restrictive covenants on this property that would prevent us from doing this or prevent you from doing this. Have you checked the title or any other ancillary documents to see if there's any issues?
We have looked at the title, and there's nothing I'm aware of that would prevent this division of the lots.
Okay. And then this is a question for staff. If we were to do the subdivision, the property would be governed by the R4 zoning district, is that right?
Correct, yes.
So then, can you kind of explain the the bulk, I don't know what you call them, the bulk requirements and how they would apply to each subdivided property?
I can't quote the calculation, but the city has a building scale provision in the code which connects the allowable square footage on the property, the land area to the allowable square footage of the structures on the property. This property in its entirety exceeds the allowable square footage, and that is because of the nature of the tennis house. If you looked at it from the ravine side, it goes all the way down into the ravine. So all of that, ordinarily a basement doesn't count at all. So obviously a tennis court is a large structure in itself, but this entire building counts. So it is currently a non-conforming situation with respect to square footage. And I think that's why it was helpful that the petitioner did go before the Historic Preservation Commission. And the commission did approve, they did acknowledge the existing non-conforming situation and really exempted, in their approval, their findings really exempted the tennis house from the calculation because of the uniqueness of the structure. So that is an existing condition. It is non-conforming as it sits. They did state support for a future small garage and mudroom addition. Any future improvements, again, would need to go through a standard variance process.
Okay, thank you. And then for the existing improvements on the property, where are the utilities and the sewer and the other infrastructure? Where are they coming from? Are they off of Lake or Elm Tree?
So most of the utilities come from Elm Tree Road to the tennis house. The tennis house is kind of the primary structure on the property.
Okay.
And so that is where the electrical comes in. The gas, I believe, comes from Lake Road. And the water, I believe, comes from Lake Road as well. I'm sorry, no, the water comes from Elm Tree Road. Sorry.
Do we need to show those on the subdivision?
That's a great point. We should look at that and make sure there are cross-utility easements as needed on the plat of subdivision. Thank you for that.
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Nearing?
Yeah, just bouncing off of that. In terms of drainage, have you looked at, in terms of how the drainage would work and all that stuff? Like in terms of when you're building and adding extra and it's already, if you looked at it?
Yeah, the property is really well drained from being on a ravine.
Okay.
And so there's not issues with things like ponding or things like that that you see a lot in West Lake Forest.
Okay.
But it's good drainable soil. There haven't been issues in the past. To add on to to respond briefly to some of the utilities, every building does have its own meter. So there's a little bit of ambiguity about where things come from, but every building is kind of split.
Because there is going to be a driveway from Elm, and I don't know how that, it looked like it was going to curve over and all that stuff, so, okay.
Yeah, for the future driveway, with the division of the property, we need to create an access to that Elm Tree driveway. There actually was a historic driveway, and that we're largely kind of tracing the historic driveway location. It actually, they probably modified it at some point because the gateway to Elm Tree that exists, we plan to reuse that. It's not where the original driveway exited to Elm, but we're gonna come in from that location and then basically follow the historic driveway.
Okay. And then, question for Ms. Cerniak, the R4, is the setback from lake standard that it's already 50 feet? I mean, so is it 50 feet and then they said the wooded area is another 50 feet? Or is it the same setback?
The standard zoning setback is 50 feet, and I believe the proposal is to make that area within that 50-foot setback a tree preservation area, which a setback isn't ordinarily a tree preservation area, so this would be adding that protection to that front yard setback.
Because maybe I looked at it wrong, but I'm looking at 50 feet and like, there were some trees, but you needed to go another 50 feet. But, to really get what you're talking about in terms of like the park kind of thing with trees and all that. That's why I was wondering that.
Most of the historic trees are in that 50-foot setback. There's kind of the wooded area, and then there's an area of kind of lawn, and then there's the garden.
Okay. I didn't look that far back.
We had talked about various depths of that front setback, and we talked about doing a greater one. The issue with that is that would really push any future development into the garden, and we would want to preserve the historic garden.
Okay. Or if somebody wanted to build something on it too, like if you wanted to build a house. Okay. Let's see. The other thing I had a question on is you have the cottage house and then you have the other house, and the line is going right through that. Are you going to be planting like arborvitaes or whatever to be able to have because it literally goes right through and you have, but are you going to be doing some type of landscaping there?
So right now it's friendly ownership because it's the family and they really plan to use the property together. So they plan to create as few divisions as possible, but there is room for future fence. It's a big lot, so it kind of looks like it's a tight space. But there's enough room to put a fence and arborvitae and things like that in that area.
All right. Thank you. That's all for now. Thanks.
All right. Commissioner Hunt?
Question for you, Ms. Cerniak, picking up on Chairman Pickett's question on tax lots. Even though it's not within the city's purview, would it be our understanding that there would be sort of a net neutral effect to the city of Lake Forest or the county from a tax perspective?
That would be my expectation. I can't speak to property values or assessed values specifically, but there are some improvements planned to the property, both interior and outside. The county certainly does review our permit records, and I'm sure adjusts the assessed value based on what's done. So I certainly don't think there would be a detrimental effect.
So we wouldn't expect the division to negatively affect the tax base.
If anything, it may work the other way.
Okay, all right. And then, just to be clear, the driveway is within the purview of what we're approving as well as the other improvements. Is that correct?
Yes, and the action of the Plan Commission doesn't specifically approve improvements, but you'd be creating the two lots, and then any required approvals, permits would follow. But what you're seeing is the intention for the property.
Got it. And then finally, just sort of a general question. There's no other risk to the city we haven't discussed that would be aware of by this subdivision.
There really is no risk. The property, my sense of what's happening is we're really giving future generations of this family, or perhaps different owners, reason to invest and maintain the property. It is an extraordinarily unique property in the community. So I think, frankly, I've always worried about the property and what would happen. So I think what is being done by the family probably is a positive to the city rather than a risk.
Got it. I guess one other question, picking up on Commissioner Thomas's question about future residents, et cetera. Just to be clear, if someone so choose, they could take out the garden entirely on the east side of the property to build if they got approval?
That the last part is the big if. This is in the Historic Preservation District.
Okay.
So trees, gardens, garden features, the city couldn't prohibit redevelopment, but we could certainly work with the petitioners to identify portions of the garden that would need to remain, or heritage trees that would need to remain. And that's really no different than what we do on any other property in the historic district.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Just one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of, they might think of doing a pool on the one side, on the lot number 1 in the future. Do they have to actually go through the Historic Preservation Committee for that? Because if they have like the 25 feet setback and all that, they could just plop that pool anywhere, right?
It would depend. Some pools come with associated pool houses.
Yeah.
If the pool is fully in conformance with zoning setbacks, with steep slope setbacks, we could likely just go to permit with that. But would also look at tree preservation.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right, moving on. Public testimony. I think we're good there. Moving on. So at this point, we'll go into commission discussion and comment. And I'll just start by saying, first, I'd like to commend the petitioner and staff for coming up with this this plan. I think from May of 2024, when this was originally in front of us, to now addressing some of the concerns the commission had and really coming up with a plan that works for the family. And I'd also like to give credit to the family for being such great stewards of this property. I mean, walking that property, it's incredible to see. It's one of the most impressive properties in Lake Forest, and I feel like as a commission, what we've been tasked to do here, if for no other reason than to reward the family that has taken such good care of this property, I think they've presented a very viable option for us. So I am completely in support of this this petition. No one else?
I'm very happy. I totally agree with you, Commissioner Pasquesi. I think you've done a fantastic job, and this property is amazing. I'm really happy that you reconfigured where it was gonna be divided. I just think it was just, that's much more logical. And I appreciate everything, the family's done and everything for the city as well. I think it's been wonderful, and I think it'll be great. I think the family will, hopefully they'll just keep it in their name and keep it in the family for umpteen years, and we won't have to worry.
Anyone else? We can, make a motion. Anybody?
Sure. Go to Will. Do you want to make a motion to approve a special use permit to provide a tentative and final plat of subdivision incorporating any related variances? And this is subject to the conditions set forth in the staff recommendation. Plus, I think what you said, Kathy, earlier was inclusion of cross-utility easement on the plat of survey. Is that right?
Yeah?
Yeah,
Son.
that's the motion.
Yep. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, opportunity for the public to address Plan Commission on matters not on the agenda. Nope. Additional items from staff.
At this point, it does look like you will have an October meeting. It will be, once again, a subdivision on Saunders Road. We'll see if it sticks this time. Thank you all.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
All right.
Well-run meeting.